Ah, yes. The night is upon us. We are here. It is election night. It is 6 o'clock Mountain Time right now. So it's pretty early. It's pretty early. We here though. We here for it. Hello, everybody. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of political live streams happening tonight. So if you choose to tune into this one, I definitely appreciate y'all. All right. I am watching, but I'm watching off to the side only because I'm not really sure of um the fair use situation when somebody else is also live streaming. So we did just get an update though. Okay, so we're at 35 electoral votes to Donald Trump's 86. So, okay. Um so this is, I am going to have the live updates going over here to the side for you, but I'm over here off to my left watching, so that way I can react to some things that they say and different things of that nature. Of course, Trump is up. He just secured a state. He's got 95 to Harris is 35. It's always like that kind of early though. Every year or every election, what I notice is that for the most part it seems like the Republican always, because of the way the states votes come in, I guess, the Republican always like is off to like a really early lead, and then the Democrat typically comes back in a little bit later, and then it gets close at the end, unless it's a blowout, which I haven't really seen too many of in my adult life. Um, any true landslides or anything like that. So So the votes are all being counted in Georgia and North Carolina and Pennsylvania right now. Maryland has Kamala as the projected winner. Massachusetts has Kamala as the projected winner. And their polls are closing in 30 minutes, it looks like. So that's what they got going. But I mean, is anybody excited about the election? You know what I mean? Is anybody um is your preferred candidate in office? Or I mean in the race, I should say. Are you like a true Trump fan? Are you a true Kamala K Hive member? You know what I mean? Like where are we at with it? You know. Um if it were up to me, we wouldn't be in a two-party system. I don't really think that the system really serves us very well, because at the end of the day, both parties are able to kind of do what they want, and they want to and they're sort of able to, they don't really have to, they can pick the bases that they want to cater to. They don't really have to cater to everybody. They don't have to cater to groups that they deem unnecessary um to cater to. I mean, you know what I mean? They find these groups necessary for their vote, but they oftentimes don't actually enact real tangible policy that would assist in whatever group it is that they say they're for. I think both parties are very guilty of this. So if it were up to me, we would definitely have more of a European style voting system. Ranked choice voting would definitely be something I would advocate for. For those who don't know what ranked choice voting is when, let's say there's 5 people that are all running for president. You would be able to rank each person. So let's say it's I'll use the 2016 example just because I remember 5 different people who ran that time. So let's say you have Donald Trump as the Republican, you have Hillary Clinton as the Democrat, you have Jill Stein as the Green Party nominee, you have, let's say, Bernie Sanders as the independent, then you have Gary Johnson as the libertarian, right? So there's 5 people. You can rank them. So you can say, I want Bernie the most. So Bernie would be number 1 on my list. Then I like Jill Stein. She could be number 2. Then I like Hillary. She could be number 3. Then I like Gary Johnson. That could be number 4. Then I like Trump. That could be number 5. Right. And that would be your rank. So let's say not enough people, and then they, add up the scores accordingly. So let's say not enough people voted for Bernie Sanders in high enough ranks. Okay. So Bernie doesn't win, but maybe enough people voted high enough for Jill Stein, and that's your number 2. So then she becomes president. You see what I'm saying? So that's more, it's a little bit more complicated, but that is a more fair and representative system, I think. They make it work in European countries. Now, I understand there's probably a logistics issue just because we're such a huge country. But that doesn't mean that it couldn't be done. You could do it on the state level, just like we do our elections now, and then add it all up at the end. So it's not impossible. But that would be the best way to go about it, in my opinion. Would be definitely some sort of ranked choice voting, or just opening it up to where debates and media coverage and things like that are a little bit more fair. Because when you only focus on 2 parties, it makes, it definitely sways people's opinion into thinking, well, I have to vote for one of these 2 parties. And if I don't, I'm wasting my vote. Or, like, people are talked into these things because, realistically, if you live in Alabama, look at how red that state is. You know what I'm saying? If you're a Democrat in Alabama, technically, aren't you wasting your vote too? You know what I mean? Like, so I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that argument still. Like, I don't really like it. I feel like you're allowed to vote for who you think would be the best person to be president. Um, Even if that person doesn't, wouldn't win, I still think it can send a message to the party that's closest to you to say, hey, if you enact some of these policies, maybe we'll vote for you. So there's all different types of strategies when it comes to voting and things like that. But at the end of the day, we know in the United States, it's going to be one of these 2, no matter who you vote for. So, DC, Kamala is projected to win. Polls are closing here in Arizona shortly. I wonder what time they're closing here, because like I said, it's only a little bit after 6 here. So, Wisconsin and Michigan. Florida, of course, is going to Trump. That's not really, it's not unexpected. That's not unexpected. So we definitely have a comment here, not excited but very nervous. Definitely understand. I definitely understand. Yeah, there's a lot at stake, There's a lot at stake. I feel like the 2 main issues are, it's really an election based, it's abortion versus immigration. That's really what I feel like this boils down to. It's abortion versus immigration. What do you deem to be more important? Because that's really all that they're both talking about, like, in detail. Kamala and the Democrats and the left generally, obviously, are, pro-choice, and the right wing is, historically and currently, obviously, pro-life is what they call it. I call it, I just call it anti-abortion, because pro-life is a little bit generous in my opinion. Because they're very pro-war generally. Definitely the establishment Republicans, they're generally very pro-war. So it's hard to be pro-life and pro-war. They're oftentimes more, as far as percentage wise, they're more in favor of the death penalty than left wingers are. So, how pro-life are you if you're in favor of the death penalty? There's other examples, of course, the argument of well, they don't necessarily believe in social safety nets. So if, somebody's born and you don't want to give that mom who you made essentially have the baby because they're not allowed to have the abortion, under your idealistic situation, then you don't want to give support to that person either because, you know, you should have made better decisions and, that whole thing, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That, there you go. So, those are really that's the key issue for the Democrats where they just clearly are better. And then when it comes to the Republicans, they've been able to paint the picture of the immigration problem successfully. Um Now, if you really do a deep dive on the immigration problem, this is really a result of United States foreign policy, particularly pertaining to, South America, Central America, places like that, making the war on drugs that started in the 80s, where you have a lot of, these drug laws that essentially give all of the power to the cartels. It's the same thing that happened in the United States when they made alcohol illegal in the 20s and then the mafia got super powerful. That's how they were able to do it because you take something that people are going to do like drinking or like drugs. People are going to do drugs, people are going to drink. It is what it is. So, if you make it to where only the black market controls that, you're going to have bad outcomes. You know what I'm saying? Now, the government quickly realized that when it came to alcohol and prohibition. So they changed their mind on that within a matter of years. I want to say it was very quick. But they still haven't done that with drugs because there's just such more of a negative connotation when it comes to drugs. You think of the homeless person talking to themselves and dirty and you know what I mean? Like drugs still has that connotation to it. When in reality, 80% of drug users, according to Dr. Carl Hart, who, he's I, I forgot what Ivy League school he is a professor at. It might be Princeton, Harvard. It's one of those type of schools, Stanford, something like that. But Dr. Carl Hart says that 80% of all drug users are casual users and they can live an everyday life and they're not strung out on the streets. You know what I mean? So, if you apply that logic that we applied to alcohol to drugs, that's going to limit the power of the cartels who are able to corrupt, like in violent, extreme ways. They're able to, basically buy politicians and buy their government, exercise extreme corruption. We see it here, but it's on a corporate level here. Whereas in South America, it's a little bit more gangster with it still. They're, you know what I mean? Like their cartel and the government basically is the same thing in certain countries. So they're only able to do that though because of the power they have in the drug market, which again is because of our policies. So that is a huge part of the immigration that we see coming to the country anyway. These people don't necessarily want to go to a foreign land. They're coming here because their places are like the term banana republic. That comes from us. That comes from the Chiquita Banana Pump Company going to South America and doing what corporations do. You know what I mean? Taking over land, taking over crops, strong arming. That's where the term banana republic actually comes from. A lot of times people, use it in the sense of people one side of a government wants to like prosecute their enemies, and a lot of times people will say, oh, we're going to become a banana republic if we do that. Well, the term actually originates from real bananas, believe it or not. So um so let's see the updates so far. So on the channel I'm watching, they have it $27.99, but on Google they have it $35.95. So I'm wondering if on Google they're either ahead or if they're including the estimates, like if they're basically just considering their estimations to be official. I haven't heard much about Senate races or um House of Representatives, I've seen a lot of I've seen a lot of like I remember in 2016 and in 2020 when the squad was running, and in 2020 when there were more people joining the squad, Corey Bush and Jamal Bowman, and there was all this energy and hype around them, and I feel like there isn't that this time, and I'm interested in why that is. I'm interested in why that is. So the economy always, that's always going to be an issue that they speak about, but if you watch my two breakdown videos of Donald Trump's record and of Joe Biden, well, not really Biden's record. I haven't actually broken down his record, but Kamala's record. Um and her record as vice president and how the economy was under Biden. COVID was a huge factor that swung it in both directions. So actually, when you look at the numbers, Trump actually wasn't losing jobs or now he wasn't really bringing in jobs at the rate that he was bragging and saying that he was, but he was bringing in jobs. And then COVID happened, which obviously reversed that trend. A lot of people lost jobs during that time, and trade and everything like that slowed down tremendously. So that was something that he couldn't necessarily help, but that did negatively impact his record. Whereas on the flip side, when Biden got into office and he was able to make the decision to open things back up, of course that's going to create a lot of jobs. So that sort of artificially inflated his number, even though he was also still creating jobs on his own. But it wouldn't have nearly been the number that he's credited for had COVID not happened again. So it's one of those things where, if we're, ignoring personality, taking that out and just looking at it objectively, they're pretty even overall on the economy. Like, I don't know. I don't see Kamala Harris doing those tax cuts that Trump did in 2016, because those were terrible, and that really that's a big reason why the economy's in the condition that it's in right now, is because of those tax cuts. So I very much blame Trump for that, because that was trickle down economics. We've known that hasn't worked since the late 80s. Since Reaganomics. Like, everybody knows that doesn't work. Even Bush, Reagan's vice president, came out and said, this is voodoo economics, is what he called it. So, when you have right wingers who work for the administration that are saying, hey, this economic policy is not good, and that's actually what lost him. That's part of what lost him the election of Clinton, I think, is because he had to raise everybody's taxes back up in order to not bankrupt the government. And, Republicans didn't like that. So they were like, hey, wait, we just, but those tax cuts, a lot of times, what people don't understand about them is they have sunset clauses. So you'll have taxes, your taxes as a worker, as, a middle class, working class individual might be cut for like that first year, that, first 2 years. But eventually the government has to make up that revenue. But they want to keep the tax cuts in places for the corporations and for, the wealthiest people, because in the theory of trickle down economics, if those people have more money to do more hiring and things like that, then the economy is going to just naturally grow itself. And you don't necessarily have to, put those things in place. Like, it'll just happen naturally, as long as the corporations and the people who are, creating the jobs are flourishing. Essentially, that's basically the argument behind trickle down economics. But again, that's been proven to not work, because that's ignoring human nature. And human nature says that human beings are greedy. And the more you give somebody and the more you allow them to hoard, they're going to do it. Unfortunately, it's just been borne out that way time and time and time and time and time again. So it's not a judgment on wealthy people to say that. It's a fact at this point. That's what historically, that's a repeatable thing that you've seen throughout history. When somebody's able to accumulate a lot of wealth and they don't have when they're able to accumulate a lot of wealth and they don't have any rules attached to that wealth, they hoard it. That's what ends up happening. So again, trickle down economics does not work. Um, but again, so when I say the economy's in the shape that it's in, um, saying that okay, so when you say the reason the economy is in the shape that it's in, what numbers are you going by? Are you going by the numbers that say the economy is weak because of the high cost of everything? That is a number. Yes, the inflation is definitely one judge of that. And also the lack of wages keeping up with that inflation, and the lack of and the number of businesses that shut down. There was a lot of companies that closed. A lot of layoffs happened, and I'm talking about in the last few years. I don't mean like this is a pretty wide net I'm casting out there, because I'm pretty much gone back to 2016, because I'm including Trump in this because I want people to remember everything that led up to now. So the people who are unhappy with the economy right now, and they feel like their job isn't as good, or they're at whatever economic insecurities people are feeling, I want them to understand why they feel that. And it's not 100% on Joe Biden. Trump did a lot of it as well, and the tax cuts are a big piece of it. Most economists said that the cost would not go down as pre-COVID prices, but the rate of inflation will gradually slow, which is happening now. Yeah, and I hope that I hope that remains, to be the case. Because I know just personally, having gone through a layoff during COVID, where I was making a certain amount of money, and then having to leave the residence that I was in, which I was paying a certain amount of rent in, having to move into a place where I was paying like a third more in rent than I was paying at the time, on less money per hour. You know what I mean? So it's like I'm looking at these things as well. Like if the job market was so good when that happened, I should have been able to find another job at the equivalent pay, relatively quickly. And I didn't until, very recently. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like within the last few months recently, I'm just now back at where I was pre-COVID. So it's like it's things like that as well. It's like, when people say they're paying the market rate for a job and things like that, well, who decides what the market rate is? You know what I mean? Well, I guess the market itself decides. Well, who decides what that dollar an hour amount actually should be and what it looks like based on what a company's profits are? You see what I'm saying? It's like if everyone's market rate of a certain job at one time was paying $22 an hour, let's say, and all of a sudden all those same jobs are only paying $19 an hour now when everything is more expensive. Why is that? So, it's these things that I'm wondering. And then of course we know the cost of war. If like we've been in multiple, or we're funding multiple wars, I should say, Ukraine, Israel. We have our hands in a lot of that, sending weapons and sending money, paying for whole government salaries and things of this nature. So we do know that we have the money, and I guess that's part of the frustration too, is we know we have the money to do a lot of these things to make our lives easier here, and we don't do that. So votes being counted in Georgia, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. Let's see. Okay, so Connecticut, Kamala's way up. So yeah, that's DC. Their polls are closing in 5 minutes. DC's only 3 electoral votes though. Those numbers haven't moved in a little bit yet. Those numbers are so the states are rolling in kind of slow right now. So non-educated, non-college educated white women are voting for Trump. So what do we think of that? I was actually having a conversation with a friend of mine about that. Like, what do I think of the whole notion of college educated versus educated voters? and I say this, um, I think that that is something that the media sort of uses as a divide and conquer tactic. And here's what I mean by that. Because if you are college educated, because both sides can take it as an insult or a compliment. And here's what I mean by that. So, as far as being on the left, if you're on the left and you're college educated, you would take that as a compliment. That's a sign of intelligence. That's a sign of, work ethic. That's a sign of culture. You know what I mean? Because this is where you learn a lot of these things and you develop your worldview for, a lot of people is in college. And um science, when it comes to like things like evolution, and when it comes to things like that, um how the age of the earth, for example, things like that, astrology, not astrology, I'm sorry, astronomy, like the study of stars and space and things like that, like a Neil deGrasse Tyson, for example. Like, more often than not, people who have these type of backgrounds do line up more politically left wing. So that person who hears that, non-college educated white women are voting for Trump, depending on the source that you're hearing that from, it makes it easy to just dismiss those people as idiots, right? Like, just, oh, those stupid women, like, they're just dummies. That's why they would do that. I can't believe those idiots would do that, right? Like, it makes it very easy to do that. On the flip side, though, a lot of times women are, because I just spent some time in Texas, so that's why I'm speaking to this a little bit as well, because I met some of the nicest, mannerable, pleasurable people to be around, and they were diehard Trump, like all of them. Like, there wasn't a Joe Biden voter within my proximity pretty much the whole time I was in Texas, outside of my direct family members who came with me to the wedding. So outside of that, everybody there was Trump, 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 Trump. So these women, a lot of times, I'm sure, are coming from the more of a rural background, a lot of times a more religious background. They're in church every week, things like that. And a lot of times those values do, for whatever reason, line up more with Republicans. Not to say that there aren't left-wing Christians or left-wing believers in God, but there's way more atheists, people who identify as just being spiritual, who don't identify as being part of a religion, people who are deistic, meaning they believe in God, but they don't believe in any particular religion. And then even people who are, affiliated with a religion, might attend church every now and then, and they believe in Jesus, but they don't really every day live it. You know what I mean? Like, there's way more of that on the left, I would say, versus the actual Bible study. I really don't believe in abortion because it's against God's will, and no sex before marriage, and like those type of it. That's more you're gonna find more of that on the right. And I feel like that lines up a little bit more with their ideology. So a lot of times they feel like college educated people are brainwashed into thinking the way they think. Like, oh, they brainwashed you. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of that from the right. They feel like when you go to college, it brainwashes you into left-wing doctrine, basically. And so to them, to say college educated, they might actually look at that as an insult, depending on where you're at. Like, oh, those, you know what I mean? Like, those, what are they teaching you up in those colleges anyway? Like, I've heard things like this where they're, well, I went and figured it out on my own. Nobody taught me how to think, stuff like that. So it's really dependent on how you view it, right? But I do think it is a tactic used to otherize the other side. You know what I mean? So, but it's also factually something to look at, right? If more people who go to college tend to vote Democrat, why is that? You know what I mean? Is it because, like I said, common interests line up, science, biology, curiosity about the world around you, learning to be more accepting, things of this nature. These things naturally occur more in college. So does that just line up more with, democratic ideology or historic democratic ideology or left-wing ideology, whatever you want to call it? Or, you know what I mean? Like, is there some brainwashing going on? Because I'll give a story. And both my parents are watching this, so they've never, I don't think I've ever talked to either of them about this, right? But so when right wingers say that they feel like there's brainwashing going on in the classrooms, this is what I think they mean, right? So I had a professor when I was in college, and I took his African American studies class. And in the class, he was sort of, how could you describe him? He was sort of like the caricature of an angry black man, right? Like he always walked around with like a frown on his face, not just stoic, but like he looked angry. Like he always was walking around frowned up, and he would start talking and get real intense, and you know what I mean? Like be having to wipe sweat off his forehead. And these are just like lectures in class and stuff, right? But it always it always turned into a comparison of how how LGBT people are being being treated in comparison to how black people have been historically treated in America, right? And so he would, and it would happen often. Like I took his class for a semester, and I kid you not, it was at least twice a week where he would go into a tangent, and it would be like a heartfelt, like angry tangent about how unfairly LGBT people are being treated, and this time it was probably, if I remember correctly, it was 2006, 2007, somewhere in there. And so, of course, it makes you think, because this is a very homophobic time, you know what I mean? And I have members of my organization at the time who are gay, and it's like we treated them better than other people at the time, you know what I mean? Because we were like, yo, we accept you, you know what I mean? You can hang with us and yada yada yada. But we still didn't like allow them to fully be themselves, you know what I mean? Because we were uncomfortable with it. Like, yo, you can keep that gay shit over there, though. Like that's how we were in 2006, 2007. It was like, yo, if you're not acting gay, you can come hang with us. And it's like, that's not fair. He's gay. You know what I'm saying? Like, let him act however he feels comfortable acting. And if, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's how I would approach it now, in my late 30s. But in my early 20s, I wasn't as mature about it. And, we didn't know any better, you know what I mean, at that time. So, but it was, so like I said, it just made me think about things like, dang, maybe they are treated messed up. Because at this time, this is also, you got to remember, gay people can't get married or anything like that. It's harder for gay people to adopt kids, and you know what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot of open discrimination that's still allowed to happen to gay people at this time. So, people are still using the F word openly, like that type of thing. So it definitely made me think about things differently. But at the same time, this is an African American studies class. So why are you harping so much on the plight of LGBT people when this is an African American studies class? Like, not to say that there aren't gay or LGBT black people, like that's a piece of it. You know what I mean? That's a piece of the puzzle. But for you to mention it as often as he did, like, and it made me, like, I didn't even really think about it like that at the time, but thinking back on it, I'm like, maybe that's what they're talking about right there. Like, that's the quote unquote brainwashing, you know what I mean? And I don't believe it was brainwashing. I think it was a dude who had an awakening, because he told us in class, like, I used to be mad homophobic. Like, that's why I talk about this, because I realize the importance, and I'm trying to fix the, errors about past ways and things like that. So, I take him at his word that that's what he was actually doing. I don't think that there was some plot, that the university higher ups were like, hey, make sure you mention gay people every class. Like, I don't think it was that. But And the reason I also say that is because he was the only teacher I had that was really like that. You know what I mean? Like everybody else, for the most part, stuck to the subject matter of whatever the class was. So if it was brainwashing or some sort of concerted effort, that would happen in more than just one class. You know what I mean? So, but I can empathize with the feeling of like, yo, why are you focusing so much on that? So I get what they mean. I just feel like it's sort of a misguided thing to be concerned about. You know what I mean? I don't feel like, you know, like there were plenty of Republicans that went to college. You know what I mean? Like I went to school with a lot of right wingers. You know what I'm saying? Like there's still plenty of hunters and, you know, camo hats and pickup trucks and the whole thing. Like those type of Republicans, as well as, you know, just business Republicans who are, you know, for economic reasons and for tax purposes want to be Republicans. Like, though, like they go to college too, you know? So there's not this whole, you know, this thing where college is brainwashing people into becoming lefties. That's not real. So Oklahoma projected winner Donald Trump. Yeah. So they got it 30 to 105 on TV, but on Google they have it 52 to 101. So yeah, like I said, for all Kamala voters though, you know, be calm for now because when we because the Republicans, again, because of the way, for one, the way the country's set up, if you notice all those states that are in red that are in the South, those are all East Coast states. So, or not East Coast, Midwest, you know, but it's Eastern time zone. So those votes always come in the earliest, you know, because we're still on the West. Like over here, it's only 6:37. You know what I mean? So it's like we got mad time over here to still go out and do our vote. Whereas other places, you know, what time do the polls close? They close at 8 or 9, or does it depend? See, that's another thing. Like that's another thing. It might depend on where you're at, or if you're in line already, or you know, they like. I really wish they had just one set of rules that everybody had to go by, but let's see. Okay, so they're talking about split ticket voters. I don't really think we're going to see too much of that because I feel like they both tried it, but the people that they both tried it with, I don't know if it's going to, excuse me, I don't know if it's going to work or if it's going to land. Here's why I say that. Trump tried it with RFK Jr. RFK Jr. is kind of his way of being like, hey, I'm willing to work with the other side too. See, like I got RFK on my team and he's not a Republican. His whole family was Democrats. Okay. But we also have to remember that the Democratic Party was pulling sort of the same thing that they were doing against Bernie against RFK when he was running under the Democrats. So just because Bernie, you know, he took that on the chin and then still played ball because he was like, I still feel like Trump's worse. So even though y'all did me dirty, it's cool. I'm still gonna play ball because Trump is that much worse. So I'm gonna get behind y'all anyway, right? Possibly RFK didn't do that. Possibly he said, you know what? Y'all want to purposely stack the deck against me and make it so that it's harder for me to run against Joe Biden in a primary. Okay. How about I just join the opposite team? That's petty. It's super petty if that's his rationale, but that's possible. Again, we're talking about human beings, you know what I mean? Fragile egos, especially on a public stage. Do we really think that RFK is going to influence Donald Trump in a left wing direction? Probably not. Like, not because that's one voice. When you're surrounded by all these other war hawks and all this stuff, and then unfortunately, RFK is super war hawkish when it comes to the issue of Israel as well. So You know what I mean? Like he is super duper pro Israel. He was in Michigan. Some Arabic brothers were talking to him, asking him like, "How do you not consider this a genocide?" And he just kept deflecting. Like it was terrible. You know what I mean? So that didn't help Trump at all. Especially in Michigan, you know, and in Michigan, that's obviously a hot button issue. You know what I mean? Like with the Middle Eastern population that exists in Michigan, in the Detroit area, it's like how could both campaigns go there and talk about Israel? We need to defend Israel and protect Israel and all this stuff. You're going to the like, what? Like, what are you talking about? So they both were horrible. You know, that was horrible strategy on both of their ends. But you know, but RFK, he's that for Trump. He's the hey, look, I'm willing to work with the other side for Trump. And with Harris, unfortunately, it's the Cheneys, the super worst Republicans of all time that even other Republicans hate. Like, these are the people that got us into the Afghanistan war, the Iraq war. This is Bush's people. Remember how much everybody hated George W. Bush when he was president? Like, y'all remember that, right? Like everybody remembers that, right? Like, because I remember it and I was young, but people hated Bush. People hated Bush. You know what I'm saying? Like I hated Bush by proxy of how much the people around me hated Bush. And I didn't know anything about politics. I was in high school. I was a freshman in high school when 9/11 happened. You know what I'm saying? I can actually tell that story because my dad had to pick me up from school that day because I was sick. And shout out to my dad. He's listening. So there's power on the road, but listening. So but yeah, so I went to school, but I wasn't feeling well that morning. So I went to homeroom and I got sick. So I went to the bathroom, you know, I handled my business, went back to the teacher, like, I gotta go to the office, call my dad, have him come pick me up. I'm not feeling well, I gotta go home. So I go to the office, you know, the office ladies call my dad, he comes, picks me up, and we're listening to it on the radio, like about all the commotion and everything. Like, and he's kind of explaining to me what's going on. And I'm like, what do you mean a plane hit the building? Like, what? Like, why would they do that? You know what I'm saying? And like, you know, he's explaining everything, you know, as far as what's going on. And so, because I remember that the office ladies, while I'm sitting in there waiting for him, they were like, "Oh my God, we're gonna be we're going to war, and this is terrible." And I was like, what are they talking about?" You know, but I'm sick, so like I had just thrown up in the bathroom. I'm not really thinking about what they're saying, but I'm hearing little stuff. And then, like I said, on the ride home, my dad's letting me know the whole scoop. So I get home. I had like a little TV in my bedroom. So I go home. I get in bed. I turn the TV on MTV, and they're talking about the Twin Towers got knocked down, and they're showing the footage just like on repeat all day. So they show that second tower like getting knocked down clear, and the first one was already smoking and everything. So and then every channel was like that. You know what I mean? I think even Nickelodeon stopped playing cartoons, and they were basically doing like they had a not Nick at Night, but they had a Sunday program called Nick News, and it was like the news for kids, right? But it was like somewhat realish news. Like, okay, so like today, for example, they might have ran a special and it would be like, all right, so there's gonna be a new president of the United States, and you know, they might like do like an educational episode about the government or something like that, you know what I mean, or how voting works and stuff like that. Um they were doing Nick News talking about the Twin Towers coming down. And then, you know, I think maybe Cartoon Network kept it running. You know what I mean? They might have kept it going, you know, because but outside of that, it was almost every channel. You know what I mean? And that was Bush. Not saying he did 9/11, but it happened under his watch, obviously. And then every war that we've been in after that has been a direct, you could tie it right back to that war, or back to that act, I should say, because we went into Iraq, you know, trying to make the argument. Donald Rumsfeld was on camera trying to make the argument that Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden were in cahoots and that Saddam actually paid for 9/11. And obviously that wasn't true because they were enemies. So why would I, that we just needed a reason to go to Iraq and that was the perfect time, because America was hurting at the time. So, we were vulnerable at the time. So that's a good time to try to talk the country into, hey, this is a good reason for us to go to war. Like, the anti-war sentiment that everybody has now, where we're like, yo, we just want to end all these wars and stop spending all this money overseas. And you know what I mean? Like, everyone has that sentiment now. We have war fatigue. There's actually a name for it. We've been at war for so long. They say we have war fatigue as the citizens. But we hated Bush for that. You know what I mean? Dick Cheney, everyone says, was actually sort of the guy in charge because Bush was so incompetent that really Dick Cheney was running the country and Bush was sort of more so just the figurehead. I don't know if that's true or not, but I do know that he was the vice president. I do know that he has a whole bunch of money in stocks and in investments in various companies that either sell weapons or sell oil or drill oil or all of these things. I do know that. I do know that he directly profited as a result of 9/11, as did Bush. So you want that guy to be the person that is campaigning for you as your Republican, that you can reach across the aisle and show, hey, look, I can reach across the aisle and work with, the other side. I have the Cheneys. So they both misstep on both sides. The Democrats don't like RFK anymore, and the country doesn't like the Cheneys, Democrat or Republican. Nobody really likes the Cheneys. So that was a misstep on both sides. But they both, that's something that, I feel like that's almost that's an overvalued thing. Not necessarily the ability to work with the other side, because you want to obviously pass bills and you need the numbers to get things done and that type of stuff. But it depends on what you're working with them on. And it definitely depends on their, like some of their track record matters. You know what I mean? Like, you can't pick the most evil person on earth and bring, and have them on the campaign trail with you. Like, it's different if, for whatever reason, Liz Cheney's like, you know what? I believe in single payer healthcare now, and I'm gonna sign onto that bill with you, Kamala. Like, okay, like that's never gonna happen, but that would be crazy, And it's like, all right, cool. Like, we'll take that one because, like that doesn't necessarily go against your moral code to reach across the aisle or to work with the other side, because they're meeting you where you are, or even if she said, hey, let's expand Obamacare. Like, that's not what I like. I want single payer healthcare, but like, hey, anything in that direction is better than not going in that direction or going in the opposite direction where, there's less people covered with medical insurance. At the end of the day, you want more people covered. So the more people you can get covered. So even if she was like, look, I'm not with you on the Medicare for all thing, but let's continue to expand coverage under Obamacare and make sure that, more people get covered. Cool. Again, I'll take it. You know what I'm saying? But they're meeting you where you're at because your goal is to get more people covered. So as long as you're not doing anything that would compromise that, it's cool. But again, to present Donald Trump as the next Hitler and the most evil man to ever run for president ever, and he's Vladimir Putin's best friend, and he's the biggest liar to ever do politics and all of that kind of stuff, right? Like, we've all heard the rhetoric. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not really. Like, like this is basically the impression that everyone has of Donald Trump. So if that's the guy you're running against, why would you pick the Cheneys to be the people to speak out against him? That's like the one group of Republicans that are for sure worse than Trump is the Cheneys. The Cheneys, the Bushes, like, W W Bush. Let me be specific. You know what I mean? I don't personally know enough about his father's record to speak on him. I know he wasn't great either. But I don't know enough to know how bad he was for the country for per se. But W, I was around for that, so I know that one. I was around for for Little Bush, for H.W. Bush. I was around for him, but I didn't know, I was a child. I was a small child when he was running the country. So, but W, I have memories of. I remember how much everyone hated him and how much everyone said, really, the Cheneys are running the show. So again, that's a big misstep. And for people to ignore that, I feel like is, it's, I don't know, man. I don't know. I guess, I don't know. I'm not as forgiving of politicians as most people. I would say most people are willing to look the other way on stuff that they really disagree with. But I mean, American politics, again, because we don't have ranked choice voting, it's really based more on voting against the other side. It's not really voting for people. It's just Trump is so bad, I need to vote against him. I need to make sure that I do everything I can to keep him out of office because he's terrible. It's not necessarily that people, I mean, there is a certain segment of people, don't get me wrong, who are excited to vote for both candidates. There's a Trump electorate that are geeked to run out there and vote for him. But that's not the majority of people. The majority of people are like, I feel like Biden did a bad job and I don't want more of that. And Kamala's just going to be more of that. So I'm voting for Trump again because I feel like my life was better under Trump. Like I've heard a lot of people say that. And then with Harris, it's the same thing. It's like, she's not necessarily the greatest. She's not my ideal candidate, but you know what? We cannot let Trump get in there. So, it is what it is. Like that's most people's attitude. And I feel like that's most people's attitude every election, which is a shame. Like the last time people were excited to vote for somebody was Obama and Bernie. People were excited to vote for Bernie. But then the primary didn't work out for him. So, then people's excitement dropped. People weren't excited to vote for Hillary. People weren't even excited to vote for Trump, really. He had that certain loud, contingency, and I think it grew. But people are followers. I think that's why that grew. You know what I mean? Like he had merch. He was selling MAGA hats, and he was cussing out journalists, and you know what I mean? Like he just had a whole media, and then the media kept covering them, like not in the way that they normally cover politics or politicians or the president even. Like Trump was a ratings draw, and many of the media, I don't want to, I guess media elites, like there was one of the program directors for one of the major networks. I can't remember right now. I'll see if I can find the video, but one of the program directors for one of the major networks actually got caught in an elevator saying how they purposely show Donald Trump on TV because it's a ratings draw, not because of any political reasons. And then another guy actually said, and these are all hot mic moments, by the way. Another guy, he actually said, no, Donald Trump is terrible for the country, but he's great for business. So they were actually like pushing for him to become, they wanted him to become the president. And it wasn't because, and these are their words. They were saying that they want him to be, this isn't me inferring it from what they said. I wish I could find the videos and had the actual quotes, but there were two different videos that came out, and both of them said these are people who worked for the networks in high up positions. I believe one was CBS, and I can't remember the other one. I wish I could remember the other one. Maybe ABC? Maybe. This is allegedly, I'll just say just for the sake of it, because I don't want to put it on either network if I'm wrong, but it was one of those types of networks, though. And two different people on two different occasions got caught on hot mics or on hidden camera basically saying, no, we want Trump to win because that's great for our ratings. You know, it's yeah, and one guy even said it's bad for the country, but it's great for our ratings. So I can't think of any other Republicans who would have the balls to stand up against Trump and say they are for Kamala. I mean, yeah, but what does that, I guess, what does that do for Kamala? Like, do you think that that's going to make Republican voters say, because I think that is the strategy. I think the strategy is if the Cheneys like me, then I'm going to get some of those Republican voters. Because I think the strategy was probably the same on the other side with Trump when he said, oh, if RFK comes over here, I'm going to get some of those lefty voters who wouldn't vote for me. But if he's on the team, they will vote for me. I think the Tulsi Gabbard move was, even though she's been kind of drifting right more and more, I would say over the years, like ever since she lost the president in 2016 as well, she's been kind of floating right. So that doesn't surprise me as much. But the RFK move, I feel like was the same thing. It was just, oh, I can get some of those Democrat voters if I have RFK. Just like with Kamala, I think she's thinking the same thing. Like I can get some of those Republicans if I have Cheney on my side, but I don't think that there's enough Republican voters who actually like the Cheneys that's a good decision, is what I'm saying. Like I think strategically that I get the strategy, I just don't think it's going to work. That's what I'm saying. Because yeah, I don't think people like the Cheneys. Period. Like if it was what's the guy's name? Rand Paul. If Rand Paul does it, if Rand Paul comes out and says, you know what, I disagree with Kamala on a lot of stuff, but my thing is I'm against war. And so I feel like she will be a more peaceful candidate. We can argue about all the other stuff, but we agree on war and ending these wars. So, like, I think that's more palatable, and that actually gets some of those right wing voters who are also anti war but don't want to vote for a Democrat for other reasons. You know, maybe the culture stuff, you know what I mean? Um, or maybe, you know, the immigration rhetoric. They bought into that. Like, so yeah, I get the strategy. I just think it's a strategic fail. The right to abortion in Florida, 57% yes. And so that's good. That's good. That's what I'm interested in too, is a lot of these ballot initiatives. Like the ballot initiatives is really where we actually can exercise our power. There's no electoral college involved in that. There's nobody, you know, you're not relying on your state to vote the right way or what, or well, you are in that sense. But again, there's no electoral college to make that decision for you. Because I don't think a lot of people know that either. Like they don't have to vote the way the majority of the state votes. Like they do because they don't want there to be no shit, but I don't think there's any legal requirement that the members of the electoral college have to vote the way their state, you know, citizenry votes, which is crazy, but the electoral college needs to be abolished anyway. Like it's insane. Like people make the argument that the popular vote should not win the election because there's a disproportionate number of people in big cities, and it'll basically make it so that rural voters who typically are right wing leaning would never get, you know, their people in office. And to that I say, so what you're saying is land is more important than people. What do you mean by that, Shane? What I mean by that is in rural areas, there's way less population, right? They're making that argument. They say there's way more people in cities. Cities tend to lean more democratic. There's way more people in cities than there are in rural areas. That, yes, you're right. Um, But if you take all those same people and don't change their vote, you don't change the way they would vote, right? You just move those people, put them in rural areas. What happens then? You see what I'm saying? Like what happens then? Um that would actually be interesting to see. Would that flip whole states? Probably, right? Like if you take just one of the big cities in California and you spread that population around Oklahoma, what happens? You know what I mean? Like, and that's interesting. That would be interesting to think about because again, that's why I say you're actually you're making the argument that land has more of a say so than people, because if there's only one family every half a mile, let's say, in a particular area, and you want those votes to count as much as the city that has millions of people in it, what's making up for that? There's nothing but land in between. You know what I mean? There's not extra people, that aren't being accounted for. There's no extra voices. Like it doesn't make any sense. So I always felt like that was a goofy argument. Like I do understand again, like, oh yeah, their voices are going to be heard a lot less often. But then I just say, well, Republicans have to make better arguments then to convince people in the cities to vote for them. That's it. The policies that affect the most people are the things that you see what I'm saying? Like that's why we should be that's why I believe in the popular vote and I don't believe in the electoral college, because and also if you know the history of how the electoral college was even put together, they included bodies as part of the population in southern states that didn't even have the right to vote at the time. They weren't even considered full humans at the time. How about that? But they included them as part of the population of adults just so that way they could sway the numbers and how much each state's electoral votes would be worth. I do feel, yeah, the Cheneys did have lots of power for a long time and that buys lots of influence. But then again, my question becomes what type of influence does that buy? And what is Kamala going to do with that influence? Like this is the one thing I don't want to happen. This is really what I don't want to happen. And I get disappointed when I see this happen, because I see, but again, this is a both sides issue. This is a right wing and a left wing issue. I'll see people, let's use the kids in cages, for example. I'll see people call Donald Trump racist and a monster and a savage and all these kind of things for when he's locking up, immigrant children in cages, right? Joe Biden becomes president, doesn't change that policy at all, is still locking up kids in cages. I don't know. I don't think he's still doing it today, but there was like a 2-year period while he was president. Kids were still getting locked up in cages in these bad conditions, and everyone just stopped talking about it. But I tracked it the whole time. I kept looking back, like, hey, are they still in the cage? And I kept looking shit up, and they were still there for like 2 years before they finally started, trying to reunite them with their parents and get them with family members in the United States and things like that. So my thing is, look, if we're going to be mad at the action, let's be mad at the action. Let's not excuse it when, quote unquote, our side does the same thing that we just hated last week when Trump did it. That's my whole thing. I just don't want people to soften up on the stance of like, hey, war is bad. We all agree war is bad. We all historically have hated war. But again, we're so conditioned to being in war now, we just accept it from our presidents. We're like, well, yeah, of course they're just going to be around murdering people and blowing shit up. And it's like, when did that happen? Like when did we just become okay with Democrats being like war hawks and stuff? Like, when did that become cool? Like, I remember clearly as a kid, that was a huge reason why everyone I knew voted for Democrats. It's because we were anti-war. And it was like Republicans start wars. And it's like, we can't really say that that's different. There's a difference in both now. You know what I mean? It's more like well, if the Democrats do it, there's a reason for it. But if the Republicans do it, it's just because they're, and it's like, wait, hold on. Like, but I thought we were mad at the action of war, right? I thought that was the thing that we didn't like. So I don't like it when I see that kind of stuff. If I point in an action and say, hey, is that action messed up? And then the person says yes, and then I go, oh, okay, well, this person did it. Then they go, well, there was actually probably a reason for that, and you know what? You can't control everything, and that's when I just don't like that. So I hope that we can get away from that. And again, same thing with Republicans. Like, I'm not blaming. Nobody singled out on this. Everybody does it. Hey, Republicans, you guys are supposed to be fiscally responsible and you guys don't like spending government money. How come the war budget is at almost $1 trillion per year and it's mostly you guys, that are pushing it up? Well, we got to defend the country and blah, blah, blah. And, that's expensive and blah, blah. Like, whoa, what happened to small government? So everybody does it. Like, I'm not singling anybody out in particular. This is a thing that I would like to see us get away from. So anyway, we're at 99 to 120. Okay. 99 to 120. Believe they have to sign some sort of pledge that say they're going to truly represent the people. Yeah. I do think they have to, and when they're sworn in, I think that's part of their oath. So we got the House. The Republicans are up. The youth vote. Okay. Interesting. So in Michigan, young people are going for Trump. 51% Trump, 46% Harris. That's actually surprising. That's surprising, but it's also, I guess I forget sometimes how rural Michigan is because I grew up in the Detroit area, where it's, you know what I mean, a bunch of cities and city atmosphere everywhere. So, yeah, you kind of have to go far outside of the Detroit area and the Detroit metro area to get to like a rural area. Like you have to purposely go there. You know what I mean? Like you got to plan for it type shit almost. So it's like, but once you're up there, you're there. So I guess I just forget about that sometimes. That like a lot of these rural voters in Michigan and in the Midwest in general, they are a little more right wing. Interesting. But Grand Rapids, Detroit, because there's a lot of big cities in Michigan. There's Grand Rapids, there's Detroit, there's Muskegon, there's Kalamazoo, there's Lansing. But in between all of those cities is a lot of space. And again, there's a lot of rural people there. So young people, young people pulling for Trump in Michigan. Let's see. Texas, Trump is winning, but not by as much as I kind of expected. Like he's only up like 6 points or something like that. That's not crazy. I thought he would have been up like a lot more than that in Texas. They're neck and neck in Virginia. They're 49-48. Wow. So with the so in Florida, it's the 60% rule. 86% of the votes are in, and right now it's 58% that they're gonna protect the rights to abortion. NBC News, breaking news. NBC News projects that Florida's right to abortion measure will be rejected. Interesting. So they think that's actually going to be rejected in court, even though it's a ballot measure that the people want. Because Florida's basically saying, yeah, we're just not going to add it to our constitution. We don't care what you guys say. Wow. All the battleground states are too early to call. Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, Michigan, or somewhere else. Yep. Mississippi going to Trump. Yeah. It's going to be like this all night, though, y'all. That's the thing. Like, so for all my, all the people who are going for Kamala Harris, don't panic yet because a lot of the states that the Democrat, like California, is not going to come in until super late. You know what I mean? Like, it's only 6:12 there right now. Like, they're, because of daylight savings, they're an hour behind me now. So, and then it's 7:12 here, 6:12 in Cali. So they still got a lot of time. And that's the state with the most electoral votes. So that always goes to the Democrat. Kamala's winning Cali. Like that's not even, anything to be concerned about there. You see these middle states are starting to kind of come in for Harris. It looks like Missouri, Kansas, Colorado, Michigan, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire. They're all looking like they're going to Michigan right now. Or I'm sorry, they're going to Michigan. They all look like they're going to Kamala right now. So, yeah, this is gonna be pretty close, I think. But I'll be following it. If you want to join me in following it, follow me on Threads at Shane_ethos. You can that's really the only place to follow me. That's where I'll be posting. You can follow me on Instagram, but Instagram post video clips and things like that, but not really political videos or anything. That's more just having a good time on Instagram. Threads, if you want to talk wrestling, you know what I'm saying? That's where you're going to find me talking wrestling. He's on Threads, But outside of that, if you want to hear my political opinion, please make sure you like, you share, and you subscribe to this channel, Ethos Media Network. Subscribe to this playlist, Politics as Usual. Make sure that you go back and check out past episodes. See, my opinion on things. If this is your first time watching me, I definitely appreciate you for being here. There was definitely a couple of different people who checked in. I definitely want to shout out my parents for tuning into the live stream. And, we don't agree on everything, but they support their son and I love them. You know what I'm saying? So, but yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and check out for now and share the stream. If you made it all the way to the end, share it with your people. And yeah, man. Till next time. This is Shane G, and I'm out. Peace.